0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
Hello, very good evening. I'm Ian Dale at Drive here on LBC, leading Britain's conversation. Now, if you want to switch on your LBC website, you can see us in glorious Technicolor because Ed Balls is here for another edition of Call Balls. That's lbc.co.uk. He's just been waving at the camera. He very kindly brought me an ice cream, but it was a single flake, but I'll let him off on that. Now, there's lots for you to ask him about. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask him a question. As I said before, Sharon Shoesmith's payout, a death tax, maybe his leader's so-called image problem, self-confessed image problem, Labour's spending plans, a multitude of things to ask the Shadow Chancellor about. Well, Ed, it's very kind of you to bring me an ice cream. It is a very, very hot day.
Yeah.
Got here without
it's
too much
sort of a 30th of July kind of thing, I thought. You know, it's out there on the streets of London, it's baking sun, there's loads of tourists, all these ice cream shops, and I thought, why should you be stuck in this office, cooped up, not enjoying the sun with all the trippers?
It's so, very kind of you. Where are you going on holiday? But you must be going on holiday soon.
Yeah, I'm going to go on holiday, going just in Europe, just going actually on the train, and we'll end up going down to Italy.
Kids on the train to Italy. That doesn't sound like a very pleasurable experience to me.
Yeah, it'll be all right.
Right, shall we go to the calls? Because there's lots of them coming in already. Let's go to John in Mill Hill. Hello, John.
Hello, Ian. Hello, Balls.
Hello, John.
Thanks for the tip. I might research that, actually, the train to Italy.
Yeah.
But
I thought it was quite generous buying one flake, didn't you? Ian thinks I should have bought him two flakes. I thought that would have been louche.
I am diabetic.
I thought it would have been over the
probably
top.
Best that you didn't. Anyway, John, what's your question?
Question is, Sharon Shoesmith.
Yep.
I mean, I agree with you. Whether it was done the right way or not, I still agree with you in the principle of what you did. My question is, if or when Labour get into government next, will you be able to do anything about these enormous payouts that seem to go hand in glove with every time that someone in the public service is deemed to be wrongfully dismissed? I mean, in my opinion, if she'd been an honourable person, she would have resigned, but that's another issue.
Okay, well, let's put that to Ed. Let's stick to Sharon Shoesmith initially. It was really your remarks back in, when was it, 2009? 2008, that led to her leaving her job, even though you weren't, as Education Secretary, her direct employer. Why did you do what you did at the time?
Well, the law is clear on this, and I think the answer to John's question is, if the courts don't think the law is clear on this, we should strengthen the law to make it clearer. The law says that the Secretary of State, who is the direct appointee of people who are in charge of children's services, Director of Children's Services, have the power in public law to remove somebody if they judge that is necessary for public confidence in the safety of children. It's in the Education Act. I did not remove Sharon Shoesmith from her job. She was employed by Haringey Council, and it was for Haringey Council to go through all of those procedures. I removed her once I received the independent inspector's report, because it was such a devastating report about failure of leadership in Haringey. I didn't think that it was possible for her to carry on in that statutory role. And the Education Act gives the Secretary of State the power to do that when they think they need to move quickly. Now, there's one argument which says she should have had her say. The fact is that there had been a whole independent investigation done by the inspectors which had reached these conclusions. At every stage, of course, I was aware of these legal issues. All the legal advice I received in the week before was that it was inappropriate for me to have a meeting with Sharon Shoesmith because that was really for the inspectors, and I shouldn't be seen to be influencing that process. And what happened on the day was the leader of the council and the Director of Children's Services had resigned. I removed her from her statutory position. The courts, after the first judgment, which found in my favour, the appeal court said, actually, this was an employment law decision, and therefore she should have had a meeting. One, it would have made absolutely no difference.
But you weren't her employer?
But I wasn't her employer in any way.
So what you're saying is Haringey Council could have moved her to another position?
Of course they could. That was totally for them to do. But the law gives me and a Secretary of State a public law power to remove a Director of Children's Services if it's necessary for public confidence and children's safety. And my judgment was, and all the advice I received was, that was what should have been done. And that's what I did. That's why I always say that in the same situation, I would do the same thing because it was necessary to stop this spreading from Haringey across the country.
So to the people that are blaming you for the taxpayer essentially having to pay her, what was it, £680,000, you say, well, it's not me, I'm not guilty, Gelf.
Well, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth that the courts decide there were procedural errors made predominantly at Haringey Council which lead to her being able to win that case. But I took the view that she, as the responsible Director of Children's Services, when there's a report which pinpoints the top and leadership and says there's a massive failure, that in that circumstance, I'm required to act, and I acted. And I think the courts were wrong to see me as making an employment law decision. I was removing her from a statutory post for reasons of public safety, and it was the right thing to do.
So all the people, I remember when this judgment came out, I said, well, actually, I thought Ed Balls was absolutely right to do what he did at the time. And I had so many people on Twitter saying, well, you're completely ridiculous. He overstepped his powers. You don't think you did at all? At
every stage, I asked the Permanent Secretary and our lawyers what I was expected to do, required to do, or entitled to do within my powers, and the view was that this was the right thing for me to do. I have to say, we were surprised she hadn't resigned, but in that circumstance, I felt I had no responsibility to act. Now, there are some people who say that no senior civil servant should ever be removed from their post in these kind of circumstances because it's all somehow the government's responsibility. But she was a highly paid person who had a job to do, and the inspector said she hadn't done it. There's a second view which says, even though I agree with the decision, Ed Balls in a cat-handed way didn't follow the proper procedure. What happens when you're a Secretary of State in those circumstances is you're being advised hour by hour, trying to get the decision right, but you're always at the mercy of what the courts decide. And when there was an appeal, the High Court found in my favour. It was then overturned on appeal by judges who took the view that even though I wasn't her employer, I'd remove her from her employment, and that wasn't the case.
And just finally on this, do you think that she should ever be allowed to work in child protection again?
Well, I think part of the problem with Sharon Shoesmith was that she wasn't in any way an expert on child protection. She was a leader of a department, and she acted in a sort of above the part of the world she should have been much more engaged in. So I was on the radio last week, and a defender of hers said, why is Ed Balls blaming Sharon Shoesmith? The case of baby Peter Connolly never came across her desk. But that's ridiculous,
well, that says
because the Director of Children's Services should know about the most vulnerable and at-risk children in their care, unless they are so above it that they're not really engaged. And that was the criticism, that she was aloof. She wasn't engaged in child protection. She wasn't playing that leadership role. And this was Haringey, where Victoria Climbier had died 10 years before. And it was so dangerous for child protection.
So do we take that as a no? She shouldn't work in child protection again?
I think that that's for any future employer of hers. But and I'm not the Secretary of State now. But I removed her from the position of Director of Children's Services because I thought that was necessary.
I think we get where you're coming from.
Okay.
Right, lots more to talk about. We'll have some slightly briefer answers, briefer questions after the break. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask Ed Balls a question. This is LBC, it's 5:14.
Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
With the RAC, fueling your road trips this summer.
118434, the handy number for handy numbers.
Calls cost 55 pence plus 99 pence per minute from a BT landline. Other networks vary, and mobiles cost considerably more.
Some people think Travel Pack is the ideal holiday destination. Others prefer a short break to Travel Pack. And there are some that like to relax in Travel Pack. At Travel Pack, we know you want to have a great holiday. The rest, you can leave to us. In fact, with worldwide flights, hotels and holidays to all your favourite destinations at a price you'll love, the only thing you need to remember is Travel Pack. Start planning today. Call Travel Pack on 0208 903 9999. At All Protected.
A house fire can take away a lifetime of memories in 2 minutes. About the time it takes to test all your smoke alarms. Fire kills. You can prevent it.
If I described a luxurious place, you might imagine I was somewhere grand. A vast palace or a sprawling, stately home. But luxury doesn't always mean huge.
Take the Lexus CT Advance, a compact car packed with luxury features including keyless entry, cruise control, and Lexus navigation. Concentrated luxury at premium value from only £249 a month. Lexus. Amazing in motion. Business users over 18 only, excluding VAT at 20% plus advance rental. Conditions apply.
It's 5:15 news headlines. Simon Conway.
Officials in Gaza say at least 15 people have been killed by an Israeli airstrike in a crowded shopping area. Meanwhile, 3 Israeli soldiers have been killed in southern Gaza. 60 firefighters are tackling a fire on Eastbourne Pier in Sussex. It started in one of the arcade buildings. There are no reports of any injuries. The Foreign Secretary says there's currently no direct threat to the UK from Ebola. The virus has killed more than 670 people in West Africa. This is LBC. Your travel news is next.
Meanwhile, in land of saving money and getting the right deal, go compare, local travelling musician Thomas Dillon sings...
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Paris, Chicago, Moscow, Middlesbrough, Tokyo, Glasgow, Oslo, Argentina, Mumbai, Shanghai, Aruba, Australia, Kenya, Panama, Samoa, La Paloma, Salvador, Bango, Ecuador, Bognor Regis, Acapulco, Costa Brava and Ibiza.
We've travelled high and low to get you the right deals on travel insurance. So before you go anywhere, visit Go Compare.
I'm Chris Golds in the LBC Travel Centre. The M3 is queuing from Junction 3 for Bagshot because there's just one lane open between Junction 2 for the M25 and Junction 1 for Staines. It's all because of an accident earlier which is also causing queues on the M25 in both directions approaching Junction 12. The A40 is slow heading out of London from the Greenford flyover to Hillingdon Circus. That's following an accident which is also causing delays on surrounding routes. The North Circular is slow in both directions between the Chiswick roundabout and the A40, and the Parkway in Hayes is queuing southbound approaching the M4. The M4 itself is slow between Junction 3 for Heston and 2 for Brentford after a breakdown. The A4033 in Tivedale in the West Midlands is heavy in both directions near the Burnt Tree traffic lights. That's because of a broken down lorry and a fuel spillage. And roadworks on the M57 in Merseyside are currently causing queues northbound between Junction 6 for Kirkby and Junction 7 for the M58. Keeping you moving, your next travel updates in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel.
With Go-To Meeting. Work from home and avoid the tough commute.
When you need more space.
Think creatively. What could you use a log cabin for? A studio? A home office? A den for the kids? Creative Living will design and build a log cabin to suit your needs, even taking care of electricity and climate control. See for yourself at our 3 large cabin display villages in Surrey. Find out where at creativelivingcabins.co.uk.
Your own log cabin, handcrafted, the creative living way.
Leading Britain's conversation. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
We now learn that Aldi is within touching distance of overtaking Waitrose, and we've been talking about the extraordinary extra things that Aldi sell. Steve is in Stevenage. Well, Steve, we've been waiting 22 minutes for this. Good morning.
My missus goes into Aldi every week. She says, I brought this canoe, you know, and it's all in a little box. And you take it down to the lake, which is what we did. We took it down to the lake.
You must be mad. One of the biggest stars on American TV in the studio with me here, Conan O'Brien. Your views of Britain.
It's changing all the time. First of all, you now have a tropical climate. That did not used to be the case.
What do you pack?
Now it's just sunscreen and a Speedo bathing suit.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Every weekday morning from 7. Only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton. Refreshingly different and surprisingly affordable hotels.
19 minutes past 5 here on LBC. If you want to watch us on the website, go to lbc.co.uk. Ed Balls and I are there in tireless attire, it has to be said. But on a day like this, I think we can be forgiven. It is after 5. Now, we have lots and lots of calls coming in. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to put a question to the Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls. So let's go to William in Fulham. Hello, William.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Mr. Balls.
Hi, William. How are you?
Hi, not bad, thanks.
Is it sunny down where you are?
Yes, I think it's sunny everywhere. Now, my question is this. You keep denying that Labour will put up taxes if they win the next election. But isn't that exactly what you plan to do with the death tax, which your Shadow Health Secretary has proposed?
Well, it's interesting, William, isn't it, that it's the Shadow Health Secretary that came out with this idea, not the Shadow Chancellor. I thought it was you that was responsible for taxation, Ed Balls.
Look, it's not the policy of the Labour Party to have a tax on death. And we had our National Policy Forum a couple of weeks ago in Milton Keynes where this wasn't part of the conclusions. And there's obviously some history to this, because there were discussions about these things some years ago. I think at that time, Andrew Lansley used to be somebody who gave the impression he might be in favour of it alongside Andy, but that all fell apart, and I think it's off the agenda.
Well, it's clearly on Andy's agenda, otherwise he wouldn't have raised it again.
Well, it's not our policy, and that's where we are.
And it's going to remain not your policy?
Yeah, well, as I said,
because it's getting a lot of comment today, isn't it?
Well, it was on the front page of the Telegraph. But I guess Oliver Letwin's proposal to have a flat tax has had a lot of comment today as well. Although we know on that one, the Chancellor is very much in favour of it, George Osborne. So that has rather more chance of being in the first budget after the election. I don't know, William, are you a fan of flat taxes?
No, well, that's not relevant to this discussion.
No, but I was just asking. I was asking if you were a fan of flat taxes.
No, I'm not, but that's not really the point. It's not just Andy Burnham, it's Liz Kendall as well who's on board with this idea for death tax. It doesn't seem like it's an isolated thing to me and to most of my friends I've been talking to about that.
Right. Well, I'm just telling you, it's not our policy.
Have you talked to Andy Burnham about this in the last 24 hours?
No.
No?
No.
I find that difficult to believe.
No, I haven't.
But when I say have you talked to him about it, have you shouted at him about it?
No. But Andy's officers themselves were explaining overnight that it's not the policy of the Labour Party. Before the last election in 2010, it was something that Andy and Andrew Lansley talked about to see whether there could be a consensus, and it fell apart. And as I said, at our policy forum 2 weeks ago, it was not only not concluded, it wasn't even raised. Now, I don't know what William and his friends spend their time talking about. I'm very surprised that you and your friends having long. I mean, who are these friends, William?
My friends.
Where are you chatting about it? In the pub?
Well, no, the student union, although
right.
about this time of year.
But, student unions have changed since my time.
And are you a Labour or a Conservative supporter, William?
I'm not going to tell you guys.
Okay. I'm a Labour supporter. I'm a Labour supporter, and I don't believe in the death tax. Is that right?
I think. I mean, it just sounds like more ideas to put taxes up, which doesn't really interest me. But
I just said to you, it's not our policy.
But you must
In
be.
fact, we want to cut taxes. We'd like to have the 10p tax rate reintroduced.
Let's level with each other. When you first heard this, when some journalists phoned you up about this last night, you must have been spitting blood, because we all know in the year before an election, you need to have iron discipline within a party. When you have a senior shadow cabinet minister coming out with this sort of thing, it's the last thing the Labour Party needs, isn't it? Be honest.
It was something which was discussed some years ago, and it's obviously right that we make sure we reform the social care system. We want to integrate social care into the National Health Service. But the question which you're asking is it the policy of Labour to have a death tax? Now, William thinks it is, even though I've told him 4 times it's not. So I'll say it a 5th time. It's not a policy.
It's not your policy, but you admit that you weren't very pleased when you heard about this.
To be honest, I was interested to see these proposals from the Bank of England on bank bonus clawback.
We might come on to that. That's something rather different.
And I had a call last night to say that John Humphreys had a package about this, and he wanted to do an interview with me at 8:10. So I spent a couple of hours reading past speeches by people from the Prudential Regulatory Authority about bank bonuses and clawbacks, and the Banking Commission and the European Union. And well, that's what you have to do in our job. And it was at about 11 last night. So my focus was on that rather than on the front page of the Telegraph, because I knew it wasn't our policy.
OK. Don't think that's all we're going to get, William. Thank you very much. Brian is in Hampstead Heath. Hello, Brian.
Oh, hi.
Hi there, Brian.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Hi. Thanks very much for taking my call.
It's a pleasure.
I'd just like to know that week after week at Prime Minister's Question Time, you used to clown around doing your silly smirking and your silly flatlining gesture. And now we have an economy that is, by all accounts, one of the strongest in the developed world. And you've been proved comprehensively wrong. So how is it that you imagine that anyone is ever going to believe anything you ever have to say again on the economy, when they simply think that your name says it all?
Well, Brian, I don't know your surname, so I'm not going to have a go at you for your name. There are many things you can have a go at me about, Brian, but one thing is not my surname, because I had no choice over that at all. And if you think it was bad for me, think how much worse it was for my sister Ophelia. Boom, boom. But on the flatlining thing a year ago, when I made that gesture, do you think that the economy was growing a year and a half, 2 years ago? Was it growing or not?
Of of course it wasn't.
So therefore the economy was flatlining.
What you did, it was still suffering from what you did when you were in government.
But the point is, but the point is, Brian, I said in 2010 to George Osborne, if he moved too quickly to try and reduce the deficit, it wouldn't work because he would actually choke off growth and the economy would flatline. And as you just said, the economy then flatlined for 2 years. So I was right. What's happened now...
No, you weren't right.
Well, you just said to me, you just agreed I was right.
You know you weren't right.
No,
I didn't. But
you did.
Were right. I agreed.
Brian, I asked you whether or not the economy flatlined, and you said it did. So I was right.
That doesn't show that you're... No, it doesn't show that you're right. It shows that it was still suffering from what you did when you were in office.
But in 2010, the economy was growing strongly, and then the growth was...
Strongly?
Yeah, it was. And then the economy was choked off in 2011 and 2012. The result is that the deficit, which George Osborne said would be balanced next year, is actually going to be £75 billion because he didn't get the deficit down. So, Brian, the economy is growing now, which is a good thing, although we are still lagging behind America, France and Germany in terms of catching up from the financial crisis. And the reason it's taking time to catch up is because of those 2 years of flatlining, which is exactly what I said would happen.
Well,
so I'm not accepting that I was wrong in that period at all.
What do you say to those who say, well, look at France, because France followed roughly the economic policies that you were advocating at the time.
Didn't they raise the top rate of tax to about, they tried to raise it to 70 or 80%?
They did.
Not our policy.
But broadly, I mean, Ed Miliband said he greatly admired François Hollande's policies.
And there's one fundamental difference between Britain and France, which is that we're not in the single currency. And being in the single currency in that period was really quite a bad thing.
But his government, as I say, broadly, not on specific policies maybe, but broadly they're following a line that Ed Miliband and you had been outlining since 2010. And their levels of growth are pale into insignificance behind ours.
Well, I think the better comparison to France, which I don't think has been following anything like the policies we advocated, is the United States, which... got back to its pre-crisis peak 3 years earlier than Britain, has posted 4% growth annualised today, and has actually, even despite all that mess with the Republican Congress and trying to stop the budget, has still had more sustained growth in the last few years. So I think that's a better comparison.
Well, I'm not sure it is, because the American economy, as you know, is very different to the British economy. I'd have thought the French or German economies were much more comparable, and our growth rate is outstripping those by a mile at the moment.
It is now, finally. Because we're trying to catch up.
And will do over the next year.
Well, we'll see.
According to the IMF.
It's because we're catching up from having fallen behind in 2011 and 2012.
Isn't this a problem for you, though? And we've talked about this before. But today, I think... it is for Brian, but I think it is for a lot of other people, because... I think it was in the Times today, there was a poll that showed that more than 50% of people now are incredibly optimistic about the future of the economy. Now, if you're going to spend the next 8 or 9 months sort of trying to make people feel more pessimistic about it, that's going to be quite difficult, isn't it?
Well, did the Times poll say, are you feeling incredibly optimistic? I don't think it actually said that.
For the first time, more than 50% of people felt optimistic about the way things were going.
Well, no, that there was a recovery underway. That is true. But that started last September when the economy started to grow.
But that does
again.
present a challenge for you, doesn't it?
I was in Bedford today making a speech about the risk to Britain the next 5 years of another Conservative government and what Labour's alternative is on policy, which we could discuss. Bedford was the place where in 1957 Harold Macmillan made the famous speech where he said a version of "You've never had it so good." David Cameron, in Prime Minister's Questions, every week tries to tell the British people the economy's fixed and you've never had it so good. And the problem is, up and down the country, people are acknowledging there's growth, but saying... I'm not benefiting. Me, my family, our community, we're being left out.
I think that's true,
let's have a recovery which works for all, not just a few.
But at the same time, they don't trust you and Ed Miliband, do they?
Well, look, in the end, Ian, the general election will be decided on polling day. On the current opinion polls, Labour is ahead and has been consistently for a long period of time.
Not by much, though.
But they're ahead and consistently for a long time. Partly, let's be honest, because we're facing a Conservative leadership who, even in 2010, failed to win the election they should have won because they couldn't persuade people to trust the Conservatives. What is true in our polling is that there are people who say, even if they are Labour supporters, they say, I don't know yet whether Labour will deliver the jobs, balance the budget. It's not that they're saying no or yes, they're saying don't know. What I've got to do, and this is hard for me because it's not easy for my party to swallow, but they are, I've got to tell people, I'm really sorry, we'll have big reforms, but there's not big spending. We'll have to get the budget balanced, the national debt falling. We'll stick to spending plans in 15-16, have our manifesto audited by the Office for Budget Responsibility if George Osborne agrees to it. This is a tough stuff, but it's necessary in order for me to show the good policies we've got will deliver rising living standards in the way David Cameron and George Osborne have failed to do this Parliament.
Just before we go to the news and travel, I don't know if you read a blog called Tech Central. I must admit I've never heard of it, but apparently they're calling your slogan the worst political slogan ever. Apparently your slogan is a choice between a Labour plan to make Britain better off and fairer for the future, or more of the same from the same old Tories, or summed up, the choice, the Labour future, the Tory threat. They think of its 8 words, 3 of them are there, which they don't think is very catchy.
Well, I thought the phrase I used today was Britain better off and fairer. And I think people want Britain to be fairer, and they want Britain and them to be better off. This is the first Parliament where people will be absolutely worse off at the end of the Parliament than the beginning since the 1920s. Is the biggest fall in wages for the average working person since 1874. People are worse off, they think things are unfair, and Labour says we want a Britain which is better off and fairer. Good slogan.
OK. Well, half an hour to get your questions to Ed Balls. The number to call 0345 6060 973. When we come back after the news and travel and a business update with Ben Kumar, I've got a bit of an announcement to make, so do stay tuned for that. I'm Ian Dale at Drive, LBC News Time at 5:31. Simon Conway has the headlines.
Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls has told LBC a so-called death tax is not Labour policy, despite the Shadow Health Secretary appearing to support the idea. Andy Burnham suggested the 15% tax on estates would be the best way of funding social care, but Ed Balls has told Ian it won't be in Labour's manifesto.
It was something that Andy and Andrew Lansley talked about to see whether there could be a consensus, and it fell apart. And as I said, at our policy forum 2 weeks ago, it was not only not concluded, it wasn't even raised.
There are reports 15 people have been killed and more than 150 injured in an Israeli airstrike in a crowded shopping area of Gaza. It happened in Shajaya, which wasn't one of the areas included in a 4-hour humanitarian ceasefire by the Israeli military. 3 Israeli soldiers have been killed in southern Gaza. A huge fire and plumes of thick black smoke have engulfed Eastbourne Pier. 60 firefighters are at the seaside attraction in East Sussex. The fire is believed to have started in one of the arcade buildings and has ruined the roof. The FTSE 100 closed down 34 at 67.73, and LBC weather dry with sunny spells into this evening for London and the southeast. Dry overnight with lows of 14 degrees. A few showers continuing for northwestern parts of the UK tonight, but generally fine and dry elsewhere. Tomorrow, a mix of sunny spells and showers. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
I'm Chris Golds in the LBC Travel Centre. The A2 Old Kent Road in Peckham is closed heading into London at Asylum Road after an accident. It's causing queues back to New Cross Gate. The A40 is slow heading out of London from the Greenford flyover to Hillingdon Circus after an accident. And there are also delays on surrounding routes. The North Circular is looking slow in both directions between the Chiswick roundabout and the A40. And the A312 in Hayes is queuing southbound approaching the M4. The M4 itself is slow heading into town between Junction 3 for Heston and 2 for Brentford after a breakdown. In the West Midlands, the M6 northbound is currently slow from Junction 6 for the Spaghetti Junction to Junction 7 for Great Bar. That's because of an accident on the exit slip road at Junction 7. On the A45 in Higham Firs in Northamptonshire, that's closed westbound between Chowns Mill and Skew Bridge after an accident which is causing queues back to Stanwick. There are roadworks on the M57 in Merseyside. They're causing queues northbound between Junction 6 for Kirkby and Junction 7 for the M58. Keeping you moving in next travel updates in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel.
With GoToMeeting. Fast, easy online meetings. Go online for a free 30-day trial. James O'Brien, weekday mornings from 10 on LBC.
As the RSPCA apparently prepares to stop prosecuting fox hunts, I can't help wondering why the heck they ever started in the first place. I would happily do the job myself if I ever got hold of the fox that killed my chickens, and anybody who doesn't understand that doesn't understand the countryside.
James O'Brien on LBC with Nectar Business, the loyalty programme small businesses need to know about.
Hello, I'm calling from the inn at Cranbourne down here in Dorset. I can do this thanks to the little boxes Vodafone installed last year, bringing 3G to the village. This year, Vodafone will be offering 100 more rural communities the chance to get connected. So if you live in a village without signal, come on, get your neighbours together and search Vodafone Rural to apply. Oh, and don't forget the Inn at Cranbourne, famous Sunday roast, $12.95. Thanks, bye!
Vodafone. Power to the connected, power to you. Consents and broadband required. Terms apply. Find out more at vodafone.co.uk/rural.
Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
With the RAC, making your summer go further.
5:35. Let's get a business update from Ben Kumar at 7 Investment Management. Ben, we were just talking about the state of the US economy, and today it's been announced that their growth is very strong.
Well, yeah. So in the first quarter of this year, we saw a 2.1% contraction in the US economy. Everyone got very worried, hoping it was just due to the weather. That seems to be the case. GDP growth in the second quarter was 4%, well above expectations, which gets the US firmly back on track. As ever with GDP numbers, there's always the chance that these will get revised. However, 4% is a pretty healthy starting point to revise from.
Now, Twitter is losing money hand over fist, yet their shares have gone up. How?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Twitter has seen a 129% increase in its advertisement revenue. Now, obviously, that's pretty much the only way Twitter can make money. Nevertheless, it still made a loss this half year, but its shares rose 24% today and are now at $46. It listed back in November at $26. So if you bought at the outset, you have made a profit, despite the fact I still can't work out how it will ever really make money.
And how did the markets finish today?
The FTSE was a touch lower today at 6,776, and the pound was flat against the dollar at 169.
Ben, thank you very much. That's Ben Kumar at 7 Investment Management.
LBC Business.
With Nectar Business. Collect points and turn them into something special.
It's 5:36. Now, here's the big announcement I've been teasing you about all afternoon. As you know, LBC has led the way in holding our politicians to account. Called Clegg, Phone Farage, Ask Boris, and of course shows with Harriet Harman, Chuka Umunna, Eric Pickles, Jeremy Hunt, and of course Ed Balls have led the way in allowing you, the British public, to put your questions directly to the country's top politicians. Well, on Friday, Labour leader Ed Miliband will be joining me from 5 p.m. for the Ed Miliband phone-in. Your chance to put your questions directly to put to the leader of the opposition and the man who may in 9 months' time become our next Prime Minister. So if you'd like to put a question to Ed Miliband on Friday, just email ed@lbc.co.uk. So he's already got his own email address. Include your phone number and we'll do our best to get you on air with the Labour leader. So that's the Ed Miliband phone-in on Ian Dale at Drive this Friday from 5 p.m. Ed Balls, what is your advice to your leader when he does this phone-in?
I think the important thing to do is to enjoy it and to relax and try to answer every question as best you can, and bring an ice cream.
Well,
with 2 flakes.
With 2 flakes, and
flakes.
Then he becomes my favourite Labour politician, obviously. Yeah. Right, let's carry on with questions to you, Ed Balls. 0345 6060 973. Jenny is in Walton-on-Thames. Jenny, hi.
Hello. Good evening.
Hi there, Jenny.
Hi. I look forward to asking your leader what could he possibly have been doing that he was too busy to register the birth of his first child. But anyway, on with the question for you, Ed. You talk about Labour trying to be fair and bringing taxes down. So why does Labour want to tax aspirational working class and middle class people who bought their homes maybe 20 years ago, but in the southeast and in London, and through no fault of their own, has seen their house prices shoot up in value? They don't see their houses as a cash cow. They see their houses as their homes. But you want to slap a mansion tax on them.
Okay, Jenny, we get.
Just a minute, Mr. Balls. I'm coming to the question.
Me, but never mind.
How are you going to keep you say that you will keep the limit, I take it the £2 million limit, down, and it would be raised annually in rise with house prices.
Oh, we do need to get to your question.
Is that going to be national house prices, or is that going to be a localised house price index?
Okay, Jenny.
Well, I think we were talking about keeping them in line with national house prices, and we really need to try and get to a position where there's more balanced housing market growth across the country, because it's a real problem that in the last 6 or 7 years there's been no house price growth in the rest of the UK to speak of. Prices at the same level roughly as they were in 2007, but in London there's been a 20% rise. Now, I think it's reasonable to say to people who have a property of over £2 million that they should make a contribution so that we can...
But they already are.
So that we can relieve
they
the pressure
the highest
on
council tax rate.
Yes, but as you know, it's a very flat structure. The council tax.
Well, why not just reform council tax and put some more bands on it?
Well, you could do that. That is actually one way to do it. But I actually think there's the way we're proposing, and actually it's not so different from the work the Treasury has done for Danny Alexander, is to copy the Treasury policy they have currently for a charge on non-residents owning properties over £2 million through companies. And if you do a banded system, then I think we can raise an amount of money which will be sensible and reasonable and allow us to cut taxes for working people by reintroducing the 10p tax rate. I think most people, if I'm honest with you, Jenny, will think that this is fair. We're being very careful to say that we'll have special rules for people who are asset rich but cash poor. They have a low income but a very expensive property. Although the evidence is that there's rather a small number of people in that category. In the end, we've got to make difficult decisions to get the deficit down, but also to relieve the pressure on working people. And I think in most parts of the country, people will think having a property over £2 million is a large amount of wealth.
Well, I think it would be in Middlesbrough, but it's not necessarily so in parts of London and the South East. I think that's the point.
Well, I think even in London and the South East, having a property worth over £2 million is quite a long way away from your average working person.
Digby Jones, do you get on with him?
Actually, very well. Over the years, Digby and I have... we worked together. Actually, before he was a minister, he came and did an event with me. We were launching an enterprise competition in Wakefield with 15-year-olds, and he came and started his speech to these 15-year-olds by telling the most inappropriate joke you could ever imagine. It was hilarious, but inappropriate. I'm not going to tell you what it was.
Yeah, well, if you're on with Duncan Bart's After 10, maybe we'd get away with it.
No, I'm not going to tell it.
Anyway, Julia Hartley-Brewer spoke to Digby Jones on LBC a couple of days ago, and he had this to say to you.
Do you really think you increase the cash the nation gets from taxation if you put up rates? It plays well to a political thing. We're going to smack up income tax, hit up corporation tax, let's hit them all. It plays well in politics. It's lousy economics because it actually doesn't raise any more money and it deters people. I'd say to him, what would you have done differently in 2006-07, Mr. Balls, when you were in charge of the economy and when the sun was shining and the roof needed mending? What would you do if you had your time again that would be different to last time?
So how would you answer those two questions?
Well, on the first question, the government in 2010 raised the VAT rate from 17.5% to 20%, and it has raised a large amount of money and hit people very hard indeed. And the idea, Digby seems to be suggesting that if you raise tax rates, you don't raise any money. I think that's a sort of slightly unusual approach to economics and to taxes. Of course it's the case if you raise them to very high penal levels, at a certain point you start to lose revenue, but that is way higher than the kind of tax rates we have in our country at the moment, according to the IMF and the OECD. I want to keep tax rates down. I've said we want to keep the lowest rate of corporation tax in the G7. I would like to cut the starting rate of tax to 10p. I don't want to see taxes going up, but I want to make sure we get the deficit down, and I want to do so in a fair way. And I'm afraid that the sort of hokey-cokey economics, which says that if you cut taxes, you get more revenue. Ronald Reagan tried that in the early 1980s, and all it did was lead to a massive Republican budget deficit in the 1980s.
That's not true. What it did was actually...
he spent rather on defence as well.
He overspent. You're absolutely right on that. But they got a lot more taxes in from lower tax rates. I think you've been reading different books to me.
Yeah, I'm afraid, if you believe in the Laffer curve, then you need to go back and study a bit more economics. If I'm honest.
Well, I did get grade E at A level, which may not surprise you. On the second point,
there was a financial crisis which happened all around the world because of a failure in our banks and of regulation. And if I was doing something again in 2005, 6, 7, I would have been much tougher in Britain on regulation and with our international partners. The idea that at that time you could have not done the tougher regulation and somehow made things better with a huge cut in public spending or a raise in taxes, I don't think that's actually good economics either. The reason we had a deficit is because of what happened to the banks and the collapse in tax revenues. And at that time, as Digby I'm sure knows, because I'm sure he studied the figures, we actually had a lower national debt before the financial crisis.
No, the national debt was rising.
We had a lower national debt than we inherited in 1997 and lower than France, Germany, America, and Japan.
From 2000 to 2006, it was actually rising, wasn't it?
Between 1997 and 2001, it fell hugely from 44% down to about 30%.
Yeah,
and even
but by 2006, it had got up to 36%.
So therefore, it was 8 percentage points lower, or roughly, than we inherited in 1997, and it was lower than France, Germany, Japan, and America. So the idea, which Digby seems to be implying, that somehow the global financial crisis and its impact in Britain was caused by public spending from Labour. I mean, I just think that that's not what analysis, economics and the truth tells you.
Okay.
And the idea that Labour didn't fix the sun when the roof was shining, or fix the roof when the sun was shining in that period just isn't true.
Okay.
It's just not right.
Right. If you'd like to watch us, lbc.co.uk is where you go. We have 15 more minutes, lots more questions to come. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC, it's 5:46.
Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
With the RAC, motorists, we salute you this summer.
Let me tell you about an accident I had. It wasn't nice. It was quite bad. Made me feel. It made him sad.
For £2,000 up front on all eligible cases, text HH to 660. Hampson Hughes. Finally, something to feel good about. That's HH to 660. T's and C's apply.
If you can't remember the last time you had your boiler serviced, then this summer you should call the British Gas Team. Our experts will help ensure your boiler is running safely and efficiently. They've been rated 4.5 out of 5 for engineer satisfaction by our home care customers. To get your boiler serviced from just £49 with our special summer offer, visit britishgas.co.uk or call 0800 316 9070 by the 31st of August. British Gas, looking after your world. Terms and conditions apply.
This used to be my commute. Jumping on the number 24 bus. This is my commute for the next 3 months. A walk. To work with villagers in Tanzania building a clean water supply. I'm an international citizen service volunteer. ICS is government funded and teams up 18 to 25-year-olds with volunteers in 26 countries to help fight poverty. You don't need cash or qualifications, just the motivation to make a difference. Change your world. Apply online at volunteerics.org.
5:47 news headlines. Simon Conway.
Health officials in Gaza say at least 15 people have been killed and more than 150 injured by an Israeli airstrike in a crowded shopping area. 60 firefighters are dealing with a major fire on Eastbourne Pier in Sussex. It's believed to have started in an arcade building and has destroyed the roof. Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls has told LBC a death tax on estates is not Labour policy, despite the Shadow Health Secretary appearing to support the idea to fund social care. This is LBC. Your travel news is next.
This is Adam. Beep, beep. Whenever Adam pops into Tesco for a pint of milk, or does a really big shop, he saves up to 20p a litre at a Tesco petrol filling station. The more Adam shops, the more Adam saves. This makes him feel... For every £50 you spend on shopping, you'll earn 2p off a litre of fuel at a Tesco petrol filling station when you scan your Club Card. Club Card Fuel Save. Tesco. Every little helps.
UK stores and tesco.com/groceries. Exclusions and validity limits apply.
I'm Chris Golds in the LBC Travel Centre. The M25 has delays clockwise after an accident between junction 23 for the A1M and junction 24 for Potters Bar. It's also queuing anti-clockwise at junction 3 for the Swanley interchange because of a vehicle fire. The M4 heading into London is slow between junction 3 for Heston and 2 for Brentford after a breakdown. And the M3 has 2 lanes open eastbound from junction 2 for the M25 to junction 1 for Sunbury after an accident. It's causing delays back onto the M25 in both directions approaching junction 12. In the West Midlands, the M6 northbound is currently slow from junction 6 of the Spaghetti Junction to junction 7 for Great Bar. That's because of an accident on the exit slip road at junction 7. Roadworks on the M57 in Merseyside are currently causing queues northbound between junction 6 for Kirkby and junction 7 for the M58. On the A4033 in Tivedale in the West Midlands, that's heavy in both directions near the Burntree traffic lights because of a broken down lorry and a fuel spillage. Keeping you moving, your next travel updates in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel
With GoToMeeting. Don't be late. Hold your meeting online from anywhere.
The Confused.com £1 million mega draw is here. For your chance to enter, buy your car, home, life or travel insurance through Confused.com and you could win a weekly prize of £10,000. Or one mega prize of £1 million. But you're not allowed to enter, Brian.
No. Confused.com.
Ends 30th September, Great Britain only, excludes Northern Ireland, over 18s, terms and conditions apply.
The #1 classical album. Summer Guitar by Craig Ogden. Out now at selected Sainsbury's stores at the special price of £7.99.
The A to ZZZ from IKEA. Y is for yellow. Computers and phones emit blue light, which tricks your brain into feeling awake. So don't look at them just before bed. Read a magazine by lamplight. Yellow light from lamps is sleepily cozy. And magazines are just a paper version of the internet. For more tips to help you start and end your day better, visit ikea.co.uk/wonderfuleveryday. IKEA, the wonderful everyday.
It's not hard to overload an electrical socket. You just attach too many appliances to one extension lead, especially high-powered ones, like heaters and hairdryers. The problem is, it's not so easy to put out the fire. Fire kills. You can prevent it.
So, you run your own business, but how do you make it bigger? One way is to accept card payments, but sorting contracts and equipment can be a hassle. iZettle is a new way of taking card payments with no fixed fees or lengthy contracts. All you need is a smartphone or tablet, the free iZettle app and an iZettle card reader. If you sign up before the 31st of July, your first month of transactions will be free. To find out more about iZettle and to get started in just a few minutes, visit iZettle.com. That's izettle.com.
If I described a luxurious place, you might imagine I was somewhere grand. A vast palace or a sprawling, stately home. But luxury doesn't always mean huge.
Take the Lexus CT Advance, a compact car packed with luxury features including keyless entry, cruise control and Lexus navigation. Concentrated luxury at premium value from only £249 a month. Lexus. Amazing in motion. Business users over 18 only, excluding VAT at 20% plus advance rental. Conditions apply.
Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
5:52. Ed Balls is with us taking your calls. Let's go straight to Mervyn, who's in Essex. Hello, Mervyn.
Hi, good evening, Ian and Ed.
Hi.
Hi, Mervyn.
Hi, I have a quick question to ask. Well, it's quite a controversial topic, actually. But basically, I don't think talking about immigration makes me a racist whatsoever. I think the Tory government, especially the Cameron government recently, have always said that Labour have had no control of immigration over the last 10 years in government. And I think they've really convinced the British public that Labour did really mess up with immigration over sort of the Tony Blair era and the Gordon Brown sort of time. So if Labour were to get into power next year, what will Labour do about tackling the high number of illegal immigrants in the UK that affect our services and the British taxpayer?
Okay.
I think it's not racist at all to talk about immigration, and I don't think it's happened because of a scare. It's happened because there was a large amount of immigration in the last 10 years, and that's caused some difficulties in our labour market for people's wages, for communities, and I think people want immigration to be controlled. I don't
do
actually
you accept
think
that Labour got it wrong in power?
Yes, of course. In 2004, we should have had transitional controls on migration from Eastern Europe to control that. And that's been a big problem for us. David Cameron, when he came in 2010, said he would get migration down, net migration to the tens of thousands. It's stuck over 200,000, so it's a big problem for him, and his ratings have slumped on immigration as well. And I think we've got to have a grown-up, mature debate about this. I've been having a series of public meetings in my constituency where scores of people have come along to discuss immigration. And I would say there are some people who think we should have open borders, but that's a small minority. There are some people who want to close our borders to all migration, but that is a small minority. Everybody agrees that illegal migration should be tackled at the borders and with visas, controls, but that is not the main problem. The issue is how we make sure that we properly control legal migration for Eastern Europe and the rest of Europe and more widely. People want to know that if you come here, you'll contribute, that you pay your taxes. They don't think that you should be able to come here and have a period of unemployment on benefits straight away. People don't think you should be able to send tax credits back to families living in other parts of the world. And I think that Labour needs to show, and we are showing, we've got policies to deliver tough and fair controls which will make the labour market work in a fair way, control migration, but also make sure that our economy continues to benefit.
It's a bit like the economic issue, isn't it? People will say, well, those sound great words, but when you were in power, this is what you did. How can we believe that you'll be any different to what you were last time?
Look, I think this is a challenge at the moment for all parties, because the reason why David Cameron is so worried about migration is for exactly that point. As I said, he promised to control it, and he's utterly failed.
Aren't you just trying to pander to the UKIP voter, though? Because there are lots of Labour voters who've gone over to UKIP on this issue, aren't there?
I actually don't think that's true, but we'll see at the general election time. I think when you have local and European elections on the same day, we always know in European elections you'll have people who will vote in Europe because, in a particular way, because on that day you're not choosing a government. I think, though, it's absolutely vital in order that we can win the election on jobs and the National Health Service that we show Labour supporters that we will have tough and fair controls on immigration, and that's what we're going to do. Mervyn wants that. I agree with him.
Thank you very much for your call, Mervyn. Let's go quickly to Naveed in Hayes. If you can be very brief, Naveed, in your question.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Naveed.
Hi there. Can I just make a very, very quick point before my question? I
Go on,
wanted
please.
to say, the Lib Dems have often been credited with tempering the Tories. Now, if these are tempered Tories, they've actually launched the worst attack on the most unfortunate in society. Now, my question, what are you going to be doing about university fees, Ed?
Well, look, I think on the first point, you can't vote for the bedroom tax, which has failed totally and been deeply unfair, and then 4 years into the Parliament suddenly say, oh, by the way, we were never really in favour of it. Can you give us credit for being against us? I think that puts Nick Clegg and the Liberal Democrats in a impossible position.
You're going to revoke the bedroom tax.
And we're going to revoke the bedroom tax, paid for by putting back the tax cut for hedge funds, which we thought was the wrong thing to do, and also by scrapping George Osborne's let me bribe you to give away your rights for shares tax break.
And university fees?
Well, that is also another example where if you fight the election saying you're going to abolish fees and then raise them to 9,000, you end up with trouble. We said to the government back in 2011 they should not go ahead with a corporation tax cut for banks and use that to put a lower fee in place. They didn't do that then. I think for our manifesto, we're going to look at all the options. We're going to make sure that what we come up with is costed, paid for and fair, and that's something we'll be doing in the coming months.
Final question from Eva, who's in Enfield. Hello, Eva.
Oh, yes, hi.
Hi, Eva.
Yes, hello. I have to say I have been a Labour supporter for many, many years, all my life, basically, and I'm totally disillusioned now because I don't think Ed Miliband connects with the voters. He comes across as basically without any passion, without any charisma, rather boring, just too ordinary, too normal, and I don't see anything good about it. Would you consider changing the leader in order to win the next election?
Okay.
I think, Ava, what you've got to do is tune in on Friday afternoon to Call Ed Miliband with Ian Dale and hear Ed doing this show live. I think you'll find that he's engaged, passionate, caring, got good values.
But he did admit that he's got a bit of an image problem, didn't he, in that speech last week? I mean, he admits that people see him as a little bit weird.
Look, what he said was that he doesn't want to be a Prime Minister who gets elected on image and then disappoints afterwards. He wants people to see who the real him is and what he believes in and what he wants to do.
What he said was he can't compete with the photo opportunities that David Cameron does, which of course you can. You apparently did a photo opportunity with a pigeon the other day.
Actually, it wasn't a pigeon,
wasn't it?
No,
That's what it
wasn't
says
a pigeon.
here.
Shall I tell you what it actually was? It was a little doll where the mum for the 1-year-old girl had put on a picture of her father who's serving for the US Navy in the Gulf, and so it was like a man shape. It wasn't a pigeon.
Okay, because you could have tweeted "Coo far too" and "Coo fast," couldn't you? Anyway, we will be seeing you again in September, I hope.
Could have done.
We're
could have done.
We're going to let
but
you
then
go
people
now.
might have been quite confused. As we all are now.
As we all are
listening
now.
to your show.
Anyway, now what are we doing? I better tell people
Listen,
what we're
can
doing
we just
after
not call it
6?
Cold Balls anymore then?
We're not going to call it Cold Balls.
I don't like it.
I didn't mention it at all. You've brought it up.
Somebody had a go at me for my name halfway through.
I know, that wasn't really very fair, was it?
It was a bit
I
tough.
should have just cut him off. Anyway, we're going to say goodbye to you now. No, Ed, we're going to say goodbye. We are going
Did
to
your
say...
parents really call your sister Ophelia? I had to say, no, of course they didn't. It was a joke.
We're going to be talking about driverless cars after 6. Do stick with LBC.
On F.